Brigantia Blackbird, a Blackbird's Brew, and as you can see, joining me today in and out is the cat Isadora, who seems to have taken a liking to the microphone, but never mind. Welcome back to Norse Studies. We're going to talk about daily practices today. Now, I am a firm believer that you can only gather so much information before the need arises to actually apply that information. And going through the process of the doing, it really speeds the way to deepen our understanding and take us to a place where we're going beyond just memory recall. And while it is possible and indeed honorable to be both scholar and practitioner, for a pagan, I do think these things need to be present in equal measure at the very least. Without the practice, one does cease to be pagan. And that's as it should be. Spirituality should be part of our lives, and uh, it should be part of what shapes our character, all of which is manifested through our deeds. But that isn't to say that daily practices should be all consuming or leave time for nothing else, or that it needs to be complicated in any way. I think sincerity, consistency, and awareness are what's important, at least in my opinion. My own practice is a mix of things that I do every day without fail, and then things that I do on a weekly basis when the energetic climate calls for it. We'll begin with what more or less stays the same for me no matter what the day is. Now, before I do anything, and I mean anything, mundane or magical, first, there must be tea. Because human lives are at stake, and my brain needs to function. And once I have a bit of caffeinated fortification, I then go to the Gilded Group, and then I begin posting, the good morning greeting, the day's astrology, tarot of the day, devotional for contemplation, a post about one of the themes for the month, and a link for my video of the day. Then I check to see if other members of Blackbird's Brew have posted their own blogs or their own video links. And if they have, then I go through those. I give them a read or I give them a watch, leave them comments, likes, all that good stuff. And then I take those links and I post them on every single social media platform that I'm on in hopes that it puts more eyes on their work. And showing support and promoting people who also support me is extremely important. As it says in the Havamal, a gift for a gift. And at this point in time, it's usually when I'm about ready for my second cup of tea and a nice breakfast. So I do 2 cups of tea, one for myself and one to put on the altar for Loki and for Sigrún. And then I set aside a portion of my breakfast to also put on the altar. And if there happens to be any kind of sweet or fruit in the house, then I also make sure that a portion of that makes its way to the altar. From there, I light 2 candles, one for Loki and the other for Sigrún, and then I light dragon's blood incense. Sometimes I'll have music playing in the background that reminds me of one or both of them, and frequently at this time I will feel the urge to meditate, at least for a few minutes. And in the evening, just before bed, I will take the time to offer prayers to both Loki and Sigrún. And other times, I will meditate. I'll slip into sleep. Where sometimes I am favored by their company, and a fair bit of the work, as far as what needs to be dealt with, as far as I'm concerned, that takes place within that dreamscape, where I have a little bit more of direct guidance. Now, all the time between, making the morning offerings and the evening meditations, that's where my practice does vary quite a bit from day to day. Now, as a witch, I have long since been aware of what days of the week are the most conducive for what kind of work, and I've always known that each day has an association with one kind or another of the Norse gods, as well as deities of other pantheons. You can relate them. But it's been the combining of the both that has been most helpful to me in evolving a daily routine. So we begin with Sunday, the day of the sun, thereby associated with Suna, who pulls the sun in a chariot, and arguably also with Baldur, given his associations with the light. Oftentimes, Sundays turns into my clean the house day, and not only because it's a convenient day for doing so, but there's something a little bit extra in getting my surroundings nice and sparkly on the day of the sun. And I do think that my efforts to cleanse the energy of the home tend to be more thorough and more successful on Sundays. I also take the opportunity to honor both Suna and Baldur, and I make a point to do something enjoyable and something frivolous. Baldur represents many of the joys of life, and making time for that kind of thing is an important part of striving to be a well-rounded and a balanced person. Then we have Monday's Day of the Moon, associated with Mani, who pulls the moon in a chariot, but also associated with Nanna, who is wife of Baldur. Mondays for me have a very introspective energy, and it's when I do the bulk of my writing for the week. And I make sure that future videos are prepared, and it's also a good day for preparing gilded posts for the next month, because I always try to stay about a month ahead. I also honor Manny and Nana as this is their day, and I make a point to take an extended tea break in the afternoon to allow for contemplation and to make sure I have a little extra time set aside that isn't pre-scheduled for anything that might come up unexpectedly, whether it's someone who has some sort of crisis in the gilded group, or someone says, I have a brilliant idea, or could you do this? I try to make sure there's room for that, to where I can at least have discussions that I'm not completely run off my feet. Then we have Tuesdays, Tears Day, and that is really the right moment for dealing with challenges, pursuing matters of justice, engaging in struggle, and cultivating the spirit of the warrior and that of the enlightened ruler. And that is why the series Modern Problems, Pagan Solutions makes an appearance on Tuesdays. It's a way of working with that ambient energy on a day when people would perhaps be most prepared to hear topics of this kind. If the writing for the previous day went well, then I'll record on Tuesdays. And if not, I'll work through any outlines that are giving me trouble and try to forge my way through. Now that, especially since the weather is decent because spring finally sprung, if I get too frustrated with what I'm doing, if I can't get through the outlines, or if it took forever to record the videos, you would not believe how many takes some videos require before I get through it half decently. That's the ideal time for me to really take a good long walk, forget everything, disperse some of that energy. And of course, also on Tuesdays, I make a point to honor Tyr. Then we have Wednesdays, Odin's Day, which is an ideal time for divination, for exploration, whether it's literal or figurative, and for good communication. And this is why you'll see Journey Through the Runes and the Havamal videos on Wednesdays, the study of divination and philosophical discussion. It's all about that communication and being able to gain insight. And it's also the reason why I schedule group chats for the Gilded Group on Wednesdays. It's hard enough as it is to communicate with people online. So when we do get together, I think it makes sense to try and, shift those odds in our favor as much as possible. And, having it on Wednesdays is one of the ways of, trying to stack our odds to where it favors us. And obviously I pay my respects to Odin on this day. And if I do feel the need to do any personal divination, I will do it on a Wednesday just because it's the best day for that. Next, we have Thursdays, Thor's Day, who we know to be a very practical god inclined towards taking action, whether it is defending Midgard from the giants, or blessing the land and marriages with fertility, or just strengthening the tools of the tradesman. Thor is centered on carrying out the business of life because we've all got our jobs to do. And that was one of my motivations for moving the Pagan Housewife series to Thursdays, because that's all about the practicalities and weaving one's spiritual awareness into everyday life. And of course, Thursdays are also the day when I usually have live streams with Georgia Liberty, the Wiccan Conservative. If you have not checked out her challenge, you are missing out on a treat. Be sure to visit her, subscribe, and do all the things. But another reason why we do it on Thursdays is because the energy of that day really fuels our efforts to bring whatever we're talking about, whether it's a philosophical topic or something going on politically or in current events, whatever the thing is, to bring all of that down to the practical level. What does it mean for us as we go through life? What can we do with it? What's within our power to do about it today? It's all about that doing. And of course, on Thursdays, I make sure to honor Thor. And it's also the day that I'm most likely to tackle any housekeeping if I'm wanting to have a more leisurely Sunday, as well as working on improvements to the Gilded Group. Then we have Fridays, Frigga's Day or Freya's Day, depending on who you ask. No matter who I'm focused on, the vibes of that day have a more distinct, lovey-dovey kind of air to them. It's a day about passion, devotion, and showing care. Now, it may seem a bit odd on first inspection to air Wicca 202 on this day until you consider the amount of passion and devotion and commitment required to even practice witchcraft and to function as a priest within a Wiccan context. That is a lot of energy, and it does require a love for all of the aspects of the craft, a love of doing the craft, a love of being able to harness one's talents in this way. But this is also the best day to turn one's attention to, the nearest and dearest. And as such, I try to go out of my way to make sure the house is very comfortable, it's very relaxed, there's not a lot of stress in the air, all for the sake of my husband. and that he is able to get some well-earned downtime at the end of a busy week. And as much as possible on Fridays, I try to avoid conversations with him that could be construed in any as being critical in any way, or I'd like you to add this to your honey to-do list. No, I mean, he's entitled to some psychological rest, and that's free from chores, free from worries. And Fridays is the day when I really make the effort to make sure that's exactly what he gets when he's at home. And I also alternate between honoring Frigga and honoring Freya on Fridays. I used to do it both at the same time, but I stopped because it just didn't feel right, and I am not looking for a bruising from either goddess. Now for Saturdays, which I consider Loki's day, and yes, very controversial even saying that. I can hear the legions of people now, all of them screeching that there's no evidence Loki was ever associated with any day of the week, and it's really controversial to even work with Loki at all. And don't you know he's a bad person? Horrors, etc., 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 and so on and so forth, and all of the usual dull, tedious arguments that completely miss the point and insist on looking at the myths and those within them through the lens of a comic book. So, moving on from that. In other videos, I have gone on to extensive detail about why I have dismissed the usual arguments that you generally hear about Loki and for associating him with Saturdays. I'm not going to retread all of that ground here. I think it's enough, in my opinion, to just look at the magical correspondences for Saturday, how it's really the best day of all for workings, and to remember that all magic is a catalyst for transformation. And what is Loki but also a catalyst for transformation? That's enough justification for me, even if it doesn't pass muster in other people's eyes. And while I do honor Loki every day, I make a special effort on Saturdays. That's kind of the big day. And it's also when I save when I save any, if I have something that's more critical or important that I really need to do as far as magical workings goes, I will definitely do that on a Saturday if I'm doing it outside of a new or a full moon. And it's also the day when I tend to implement major changes, whether it's in, the household, or a change in my own personal routine, something spiritual, whatever's needed. If it needs to change, I try to start that on a Saturday. And at this stage, that's pretty much where I'm at when it comes to daily practices, as certainly the work I do for this channel and to maintain the Gilded Group is all part of that practice. Because even the mundane aspects of life can be tied into spiritual practice. It's just a matter of integration, and that, of course, is always evolving. So that's where I'm at. And next week, we'll be talking about my 6 month checkup into the exploration of the Norse spiritual realm. So I hope you'll be back for that. In the meantime, I would love to hear about your own daily practices. What lets you get your foot in the door that you were able to take, spirituality from something you read about into something that you also do. I would love to hear about that because, we're all different. We have different experiences, different perspectives, different needs. And it can be very instructive to hear about, how people actually got therein and what's been helpful for them. Because the more we share that information amongst ourselves, the more ideas we have to share with others who might be looking for change or who are very new to their path. It gives us a bigger toolbox, essentially, is what I'm saying. So I do hope you'll share your thoughts with me in the comment section, or that you will come share with us on the Gilded Group. There's a link to join us in the description box below. You'd be very welcome among us. So I do hope to see you soon. But that will do it for now, and I will see you next time. Bye.